Imagine a world where your country has, well, absolutely no military,
Right.
where your boss legally cannot pay you a single cent more than the exact physical or mental value of your labor, where your religion is forced by global law to embrace every other faith, and where the United Nations dictates exactly how you are educated.
It sounds like science fiction.
It really does.
Huh.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. If you are joining us today, you are in for something completely wild. We are opening up what is essentially a forgotten instruction manual for human civilization.
Yeah, it really is a comprehensive manual. We're looking at this blueprint that attempts to, reverse engineer human nature and build a completely new global society from the ground up.
And what's fascinating is that this isn't some ancient scroll. The date is August 10th through the 13th, 2002. Just picture the scene for a second. We are in Aliyar, Tamil Nadu, India, at a place called the Temple of Consciousness.
Which is an amazing name, by the way.
Right. You have over 1,000 delegates who have flown in from all around the world. And they are gathering for what they call the World Congress on global vision and strategies for peace, nonviolence, and harmony.
And, the setting alone gives you a sense of the scale, but it's crucial to understand who actually put this together. I mean, this wasn't some fringe meetup in a basement.
No, not at all.
The organizers bring a massive amount of academic and philosophical weight to the table. You have the brain trust of the World Community Service Center, Madurai Kamaraj University, Gandhigram Rural Deemed University, and the Association for Sarva Seva Farms.
That is a serious lineup.
Exactly. These are serious academic and rural development organizations, basically pooling their collective intellect for this one massive event.
Right, so you have professors, philosophers, sociologists all sitting down in 2002 looking at the state of the globe and basically deciding, well, we need a complete rewrite.
Yes, a total system reboot.
And the output of this massive 4-day gathering is the document we have in front of us today, which is the Aliyar Declaration 2002. It's an incredibly detailed 8-point global plan of action.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because before we get into the actual rules, and trust me, they are intense, the very first thing that hits you in the preamble is this profound, almost overwhelming sense of hope.
It really jumps right off the page, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The preamble explicitly states their collective anticipation for a world community that actually enjoys peace and harmony. They use this phrase, one humanity.
One humanity.
Right, and they don't frame it as some distant, impossible utopia. They frame it as a collective hope that seems tangibly possible because of the developments unfolding at the dawn of the 21st century.
Right, because in 2002, they saw the internet truly connecting us, they saw rapid globalization, and they thought, we can actually do this, but how? Because you can't just throw your hands up and say, hey, everyone, let's just be nice to each other. Exactly, and that is where the core philosophy of this entire declaration really comes in. The preamble states unequivocally that world peace cannot just be legislated from the top down. Meaning, you can't just sign a piece of paper in Geneva and expect the world to fundamentally change. They posit this very specific chain of causality, right?
Yeah.
World peace can only be achieved when there's peace within every individual first.
Okay, so it starts with the individual.
Yes, that internal peace then extends to the family extends to the society, and finally society extends to the nation.
So it's a completely inside-out approach to geopolitics. You start with the human mind, not the treaty, which honestly is a beautiful philosophical starting point.
It is.
But, and this is a massive, while the document starts by talking about your internal soul, the very first official decree, point on, is a sweeping structural tearing down of global geopolitical power as we know it.
It is an incredible pivot. I mean, they move from the internal state of the individual directly into calling for the establishment of a one-world federal government.
Okay, wait. Let's pause right there. A one-world federal government. I want you, the listener, to really imagine trying to convince 190 different CEOs to dissolve their wildly different competing companies into one giant cooperative.
It's a logistical nightmare just thinking about it.
It is. You have nations with completely different values, vastly different economies, centuries of historical grievances. How on earth does this document propose to handle the immense friction between national sovereignty and this new global federation?
Well, the authors actually anticipated that exact friction. The document states that profound respect for the unity of people, as well as the continuing sovereignty of all nations, must be the cornerstones.
But how do you have both?
That's the trick. They radically redefine what sovereignty actually means. They place incredibly strict conditions on what a national government is even allowed to be in the first place.
What kind of conditions are we talking about here?
Well, the text explicitly demands that all national administration must be by secular elective democracy.
Wait, secular and elective. So no exceptions. If a country is a monarchy, they just have to dissolve the throne.
None. Zero exceptions. The Declaration specifically bans royal, military, or theocratic dictatorships.
Wow.
Yeah. If a nation is ruled by a king, a military junta, or a religious council, it is fundamentally incompatible with this framework. On top of that, it mandates that all national governments must be strictly secular.
So no official state religions allowed anywhere on the globe.
Precisely.
That is staggering. You are essentially telling a significant portion of the planet that their entire system of governance systems that have been in place for centuries, in some cases, is invalid and must be dismantled immediately to join this federation.
Erdogan's ultimatum.
And it's all in service of their ultimate goal, which the text frames directly. They want to outlaw war permanently. They actually classify war not just as a bad idea or a failure of diplomacy, but as a crime against humanity.
Right. They view human history as this haunting pattern of internecine war, meaning mutually destructive conflict. They argue that because no human being is authorized to kill another, the only way to break this historical loop of mutual destruction is a single federal government that enforces natural justice.
Okay, but to enforce natural justice globally, you need an apparatus. And they look at our existing international infrastructure, specifically the United Nations, and demand a total overhaul.
Yes. What's fascinating here is how they propose democratizing the UN. Because right now, the UN has a very specific power dynamic, right?
Yeah, it heavily favors the countries that won World War II.
Exactly. So the text calls for representation to be based strictly on population.
Strictly on population.
Strictly on population, with equal rights and responsibilities for all members. But the real teeth of this mandate, the part that would really shake up geopolitics, is regarding the veto power.
You mean the veto power held by the 5 permanent members of the Security Council? So the U.S., the U.K., France, Russia, and China.
Yeah. The Declaration does not mince words here. It literally calls the veto power vested with a few nations a black mark on the world community, and it demands it be entirely removed.
A black mark. I mean, if you're listening to this and you live in one of those 5 countries, this document is explicitly saying your country's disproportionate geopolitical influence is an injustice that must be erased immediately.
It's a huge leveling of the playing field.
It is. Because if voting is based strictly on population, the center of global power shifts immediately and massively toward Asia and Africa.
Right, because it fundamentally violates their concept of natural justice. To have a system where one single nation can arbitrarily block the consensus of the entire rest of the globe.
Makes sense.
So they strip that power away. And then they empower this newly democratized UN with immense authority. It becomes the sole entity tasked with safeguarding the human birthright to food, water, shelter, security, education, and livelihood.
But here's the thing that really made me scratch my head. If they outlaw war completely, what happens to the militaries?
That is the million-dollar question.
Right, because practically speaking, you have millions of people currently employed by the global military-industrial complex. You have standing armies, you have weapons manufacturers, defense contractors. Did they just expect all these soldiers to pack up, go home, and find new jobs at the grocery store?
That's exactly where they get incredibly pragmatic, actually. They don't just send everyone home. They propose a complete systemic transformation of the military mechanism itself.
Okay, how does that work?
First, the text states that UN peacekeeping forces would actively safeguard all borders. And it explicitly notes that this transcends old concepts of sovereignty. The UN becomes the only arbiter of border security everywhere.
So individual nations don't defend their own borders anymore.
Exactly. But the really wild idea, the extrapolation of this, is the creation of a World Peace Service Corps.
Yes. Talk to me about this service corps. This blew my mind.
So the text proposes utilizing all national defense personnel at the discretion of the UN to provide medical, educational, and technological services and to basically develop infrastructure in underdeveloped nations.
Let's really visualize this for a second. You are taking infantrymen, fighter pilots, artillery experts, people whose entire professional existence is trained for combat, and you are repurposing their logistical capabilities.
Precisely.
The military engineering battalions that currently build temporary bridges just to move tanks across rivers in a war zone.
Yeah.
Now they are building permanent bridges for rural communities that don't have supply lines. The military medical teams are deploying to regions without healthcare access.
Yeah.
It is a total ground-up conversion of the world's largest mechanism for destruction into a mechanism for global infrastructure.
And this massive logistical shift would be supported by a fund contributed to by all member nations according to their economic capacity. It recognizes the immense organizational power of the military. It says, look, let's not destroy this incredible logistical capacity. Let's just aim it at human betterment instead of war.
Okay, but restructuring governments and turning soldiers into bridge builders, that is logistics. It is incredibly complex logistics, sure, but it is still just moving pieces on a chessboard.
Right.
But human beings aren't chess pieces. Restructuring governments is one thing, but how do you unite a globe that is deeply, fundamentally fractured by different belief systems and massive wealth inequality? You can build a bridge, but how do you bridge a centuries-old ideological divide?
That is the perfect question, because the document totally anticipates it. The transition from physical borders to mental borders is where the Aliyar Declaration gets remarkably radical. This brings us directly into their approach to religion.
Point two.
Yes, point two. The Declaration asks humanity to acknowledge and strive for universal agreement on one truth, one religion.
Now, I have to admit, when I first read the phrase one religion, major alarm bells went off for me.
Naturally.
Historically speaking, whenever a governing entity demands one religion, it usually precedes something terrible. It sounds incredibly authoritarian at first glance.
It does sound alarming initially, but you have to look really closely at how they define this in the text. They aren't saying one specific traditional religion needs to conquer all the rest.
Right. They aren't saying everyone has to be Buddhist or everyone has to be Christian.
Exactly. The text defines this one truth as the acknowledgement that all forms and names refer to the same supreme divinity. They describe this divinity as omniscient, omnipotent, and omnipresent, and crucially they state that this divinity has transformed into the universe.
So, if I'm understanding this correctly, it is a deeply pantheistic view. They
Yeah.
are essentially saying, look, every religion on Earth is just using different vocabulary to describe the exact same underlying cosmic reality, the universe itself.
Exactly. They're saying all religions need to realize they are looking at the exact same elephant, just from different angles.
I see.
But while the philosophy is unifying, the mandates that follow it are highly interventionist.
How so?
Well, the document demands that traditional rites and rituals be reviewed in the light of contemporary understanding and culture. And it places the responsibility for this reform squarely on the religious leaders of the world.
So it dictates a kind of forced tolerance, because it states that as a necessary prerequisite, every religion must endorse mutual acceptance and respect for others.
Right.
They are literally legislating theological tolerance. If your religion has a core tenet that says all other religions are false and their followers are doomed, the Aliyar Declaration basically says that tenet is illegal and must be excised.
That's right. But the most shocking mandate regarding religion isn't even theological. It's economic.
Oh man, this part.
The text states, and I quote, "All excessive accumulation of wealth and property by religious institutions should be utilized for providing technical education and other social welfare works."
Let that sit for a moment. Just imagine the reality of enforcing this.
It's wild.
We are talking about the global seizure and redistribution of excess wealth from all religious institutions on Earth. Imagine a UN body walking into the Vatican, or a massive megachurch in Texas, or a heavily endowed temple in India, determining what constitutes their immediate operational needs, seizing the rest of the gold, the land, the bank accounts, and using it to build a technical college down the street.
The sheer administrative and social upheaval that would cause it is almost unimaginable.
People would riot.
Oh, absolutely. But it reveals exactly how the authors view resources. To them, hoarded wealth, even if it is hoarded in the name of divinity, is a fundamental failure of human obligation.
Which segues perfectly into their broader economic system in point 3. Because if they are willing to seize religious wealth, wait until you hear how they view the money in your own pocket.
Yeah, this is where their utopian vision starts hitting very close to home.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The section titled Realize Economic Justice for All states very plainly, money is a token of labor. Hence, all financial exchange should be proportionate to labor or services rendered.
This is a fundamental rewiring of modern capitalism. Think about it. In our current system, money can be a token of investment, of compound interest, of market speculation, of passive income.
Buying low, selling high?
Exactly. The Aliyar Declaration strips all of that away entirely. They argue that contemporary economic conventions are obsolete. They demand that financial exchange be strictly tied to physical or mental labor. You work, you get paid for the value of that work. End of story.
But wait, how does that actually play out for the average person? Because they follow this up by tackling inherited wealth. The text literally says inherited property should go to the Social Security Fund to maintain orphans, the aged, the invalid, and all dependent and needy people. So I can't pass my house or my savings down to my kids.
Under this framework, no. Every able adult must live by their own earnings proportionate to their labor.
I have to push back on this philosophically. If you completely remove generational wealth, if you sever that link entirely, how does that shift human motivation?
It's a great point.
Think about why so many people work grueling hours to build a business or accumulate savings. Often, the core driving force is to provide a better, easier life for their offspring. If you say, actually, when you die, the state takes everything you built to fund an orphanage, do people still innovate with the same ferocity?
It is a profound psychological question. And the Declaration's perspective seems to be that providing for all of society's vulnerable is a higher moral imperative than familial inheritance. They're basically asking you to expand your biological definition of family to include the entire human race.
Right.
It loops perfectly back to that preamble, remember. Individual peace leads to family peace, which leads to societal peace. They are economically merging the family unit with the societal unit.
And this strict utilitarian view of labor extends directly into what we are allowed to do with our free time. The war they wage on commercial entertainment in this document is intense.
Extremely intense. The text demands a review and curtailing of exorbitant financial transactions related to sports, entertainment, and gambling.
And they get highly specific about sports. It says, sports must be made non-commercial and restricted only to the purpose of fitness.
If we analyze the mechanism here, it reflects a society that is entirely focused on functional value. If an activity doesn't contribute to direct human betterment, education, or labor parity, it is deemed an obsolete distraction.
So no more massive stadiums.
Right. The commercialization of sports, the billion-dollar broadcasting rights, the massive player salaries, the stadium merchandise is viewed as a gross misallocation of human energy and resources that should be going towards solving fundamental human needs.
So in this 2002 blueprint, there is no NFL.
Yep.
There is no Premier League, no billion-dollar World Cup. You play soccer in the park to keep your heart healthy, not to sell jerseys with your name on them. It is a stunning rejection of modern entertainment culture. But wait. If we are stripping away these massive industries, what happens to all those jobs? They actually offer a mathematically simple yet practically wild solution to unemployment.
They do. They call unemployment a curse, threatening the whole world. And their solution runs completely counter to modern economic theory.
Which is?
Modern theory says, if you have unemployment, you need to create new jobs, stimulate the economy, invent new industries. The Aliyar Declaration says, absolutely not. Don't create new jobs.
Right. The text literally says unemployment cannot be solved by any means other than the optimal redistribution of work. It says employment must be shared optimally by reducing working hours for everyone.
Let's walk through a concrete scenario of how this mechanism works because it's fascinating. Imagine a factory that needs exactly 100 hours of labor a week to produce what society needs. Currently, 2 people work 50 hours each, and 2 other people in the town are unemployed.
And in our current system, the unemployed people just suffer, or the factory tries to invent a new product it doesn't really need just to hire them.
Exactly. But the Aliyar mechanism says all 4 people now work 25 hours a week. Unemployment goes to 0 instantly.
But here's the catch. How do those first 2 people afford to live when their hours are cut in half? That forces us to look back at their definition of the value of labor and the state's responsibility. Because in this system, the state is heavily subsidizing your existence. Which brings us to the individual.
Right.
They don't just care about how you work. They care deeply about how you are born, how you learn, and what rights you have just by existing. This heavily structured view of labor is matched by their mandates for citizen rights.
We move from macroeconomics directly to the individual at the center. The document mandates universal respect and recognition for the greatness of womanhood.
Point 4.
Yes. Now, in a broad philosophical text about world peace, you might expect this to just be a generalized statement about gender equality. But hidden inside this broad point is a surprisingly specific, biologically targeted policy prescription.
It is so specific. It gave me whiplash when I read it. It mandates providing special facilities for women's needs according to female biology, and then it gives an exact rule. It says, from the start of third trimester of pregnancy to the third month after delivery, women should have maternity leave with full pay and benefits.
6 exact months.
Yes. 6 months.
Yeah.
In a document that discusses the cosmic nature of the universe and dismantling national militaries, they carve out a highly specific 6-month window for maternity leave. Why? Because it shows the authors weren't just thinking in abstract utopian clouds.
Exactly.
They were considering the absolute biological realities of perpetuating the human race. They recognized that half the population bears a unique physical burden to keep humanity going, and true economic justice requires a systemic, fully funded accommodation for that biological reality.
It is a really fascinating integration of biology into politics. And they pair this with a mandate giving women equal opportunity for education and all professions. Interestingly, they make sure to specifically note, including spiritual pursuits.
Which ties right back to their reform of religion. If traditional religions are historically patriarchal, the Declaration demands that women have equal access to the highest levels of spiritual leadership. You fundamentally cannot have a male-only priesthood in the Aliyar world.
It is a complete leveling of the playing field. And to prepare individuals for this incredibly leveled, highly structured society, Point V proposes a complete overhaul of how we learn. The curriculum of the future focuses on general knowledge, production skills, philosophy of life, ethics, and peace education.
But the most significant part of this educational mandate is the focus on the internal state of the student. They mandate striving for the refinement of the heart and the discipline of the soul.
Yes, and how do they achieve this? By introducing mandatory meditation and introspection techniques into the education system globally. The text says the goal is to streamline the mind and sublimate the character.
Let's focus on that word for a second, sublimate.
We definitely should spend a minute unpacking that word. Sublimation, in a psychological context, is the process of channeling negative or socially unacceptable impulses like aggression, greed, or selfishness into positive, constructive behaviors.
So what does that actually look like in a classroom for, say, a 10-year-old?
Imagine a classroom where, alongside learning math or reading, children are being actively trained every single day to identify their own anger or their own desire to hoard toys, and then they're given specific introspective techniques to dissolve those feelings. By mandating this globally, the state is structurally attempting to eliminate the roots of violence and greed before they can manifest in adulthood.
It perfectly connects back to the preamble's core thesis, doesn't it? World peace starts with peace within the individual. They're literally legislating the cultivation of inner peace as a mandatory part of human development.
They are.
And once you've educated this perfectly peaceful, sublimated citizen, the state owes them a tremendous amount of rights.
The list of guaranteed human rights in Point 7 is comprehensive. The text states that each person must be guaranteed sufficient access to food, water, healthcare, education, and livelihood.
It changes these from commodities you buy to absolute birthrights you are owed. But the mechanism for providing these rights is what really caught my eye. Let's look at how they handle natural resources. The text says water resources, like rivers, and geological resources, like minerals, gas, and petroleum, are to be made the common property of all people of the country.
And their use is to be administered centrally. In cases of shared territory across what used to be national borders, their use should be allocated by a body appointed by the UN.
Think about the device you, the listener, are using to hear this deep dive right now. It is full of rare earth metals. If you drive a car, think about the gas in your tank. Under our current framework, those resources belong to whatever corporation extracted them or whatever nation's borders they sat under.
Right.
The Aliyar Declaration views natural resources like an open-source software license. No one wrote the code of the earth. No one created the petroleum. Therefore, it belongs equally to you and everyone else on the planet.
And if we look at the historical implications of that, it removes one of the primary drivers of human conflict, resource wars.
Exactly.
If all geological resources are centrally administered common property, you fundamentally cannot invade your neighbor for their oil because it's already equally yours and theirs.
And speaking of conflict, justice, and the state's power, we have to talk about their stance on capital punishment. It is outlawed entirely, as we mentioned, but the reasoning provided in the text is incredibly unique.
It is. When we usually debate capital punishment, the arguments focus on the rights of the accused, the possibility of executing an innocent person, or the moral degradation of a state that commits violence. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the Aliyar Declaration takes a completely different angle.
It says, and this is a quote, "The barbaric practice of murdering a person by judicial decree leaves his entire family grieving and innocent of any crime."
They center the victimhood completely on the family left behind.
It views the execution not just as an act against the convicted murderer, but as an unjust infliction of extreme trauma on an innocent family unit. It's a profoundly empathetic legal framework that forces the justice system to consider the collateral emotional damage of its actions.
So we have built a picture of this society. We have a massive resource-sharing global apparatus. It guarantees rights, controls all wealth, seizes religious assets, eliminates commercial sports, and mandates meditation for children.
Which begs a massive, towering question. If society is structured this way, who on earth is trusted to run it? Who gets to pull the levers of this incredibly powerful machine? Because if you hand this apparatus to a corrupt leader, it's a dystopia instantly. The Declaration's answer requires a total ground-up reinvention of what a politician even is.
Yes, the authors observe in point 6 that current political systems are based on conditions relevant to the past. They argue that because science has advanced and global lifestyles have changed, political reform must follow suit.
So what does this all mean? The reforms they suggest are mind-bending. The text stipulates a rule that would completely shatter modern politics. No executive powers are to be wielded by elected officials.
Zero executive power. Let that sink in.
Wait, so if I'm understanding this, what is their actual job? I tried to think of an analogy. It's like electing a project manager for a massive skyscraper construction site, but explicitly forbidding them from picking up a hammer, choosing the materials, or making a single structural decision on their own.
That's a great way to look at it.
Yeah.
The document is very clear on what they're allowed to do. Their duty is solely to enact legislation based on the advice of policy experts, and to work in the service of people in their respective constituencies.
So they're essentially public spokespeople, conduits. The politician is no longer the decider. The politician is just the person who listens to the constituency's needs, takes those needs to a panel of unelected, highly trained policy experts, gets a scientifically backed solution, and then formally enacts it.
It is an attempt to completely remove ego, charisma, and populism from the political sphere. Think about how we elect people now.
It's mostly a popularity contest.
Exactly. We often vote based on their personality, their rhetorical skill in a debate, or their ability to project strong leadership. The Aliyar Declaration views that as a fatal flaw. They want governance to be a rigid science, not a popularity contest.
And they enforce that with a second major reform. The text mandates a stipulated minimum qualification for holders of elected office.
And it is a high bar. They call for setting up a special department of political science, which they explicitly dub the science of good governance, in every single college.
And here is the kicker. A degree course from this specific department is compulsory for anyone who aspires to run for political office.
Let's analyze the implications of that for a second. You cannot just be a wildly successful business person or a famous actor or a charismatic local community leader and decide to run for global or national office. You must have formal academic certification in the science of good governance.
It is the ultimate technocracy. You wouldn't let a charismatic actor perform open heart surgery without a medical degree. The Aliyar Declaration argues you shouldn't let someone enact legislation without a governance degree.
It creates a massive barrier to entry. But from their perspective, it acts as a necessary quality control mechanism. If the state is managing all global resources and reshaping human labor, the people managing that state must be academically vetted experts, not just people who are good at giving speeches.
It is a fascinating proposition. But this demand for academic rigor and a literal science of good governance actually mirrors the Declaration's final and perhaps most unexpected pivot. Because just when you think you have a handle on this geopolitical and economic blueprint, Point 8 decides it needs to fundamentally rewrite the laws of physics.
It is quite the leap. We enter a section dealing with a cosmic paradigm shift. The text observes that the increasing number of unresolved problems in cosmology and particle physics calls for a radical paradigm shift in our concept of nature.
I remember reading this for the first time and just stopping in my tracks. You are reading a document about UN veto powers, seizing church funds, maternity leave, and suddenly you are reading about cosmology. It feels like a total non sequitur.
It seems disconnected, sure, but to the authors, it is the linchpin of the entire system. They don't just ask scientists to look into a new paradigm. They explicitly dictate what that new paradigm must be. The text claims, as gravity is the only force operating at all levels, it is of utmost importance that science be based on a proper understanding of it. And it states that the concept of gravity as the inherent property of space must be seriously investigated.
And they go further. They tackle magnetism, asserting, as it is only magnetism that manifests all kinds of energy, including electricity, clear knowledge on the subject should be obtained through scientific research and imparted to students of schools and universities. Now, I have to push back here.
Go ahead.
Should a peace congress in Tamil Nadu really be dictating physics paradigms to the global scientific community, it is wildly ambitious to tell the world's physicists that their current understanding of the universe is flawed, and they must adopt this specific view. Why on earth is this in a peace treaty?
This raises an important question, right?
Yeah.
To understand why this is included, we have to go all the way back to the one-truth philosophy we discussed earlier. To the authors, the universe is deeply, fundamentally interconnected. Think of it like a giant cosmic spider web.
Okay, I like that. How so?
Current geopolitics acts like every nation, every person is a separate bug sitting independently on that web. The Aliyar authors are saying, no, physics proves we aren't the bugs. We are the web itself.
Ah, so if you pluck a string in Tokyo, it literally vibrates in Toronto.
Exactly. You cannot have a holistic, peaceful human society if humanity fundamentally misunderstands the physical forces binding the universe together. If you believe the universe is disjointed, chaotic, and separate, your human society will reflect that chaos and separation. But if you understand the universe as a single unified field bound inherently by gravity and manifesting energy through magnetism, you understand that humanity is also a single unified field.
So the physical laws of the universe act as the ultimate blueprint for the moral laws of humanity. They are saying that if science gets the universe wrong, society gets human relations wrong.
It is the ultimate synthesis of physics, philosophy, and politics. They are demanding that schools teach this unified theory of energy so that a 10-year-old grows up understanding their literal physical connection to the rest of the cosmos, and therefore their unbreakable connection to their fellow humans.
Which brings us to the emotional and spiritual core of the document, the conclusion. After all these rigid mandates outlawing war, eliminating inherited wealth, redefining gravity, the tone softens beautifully. I want to read the concluding thoughts from Vethathiri Maharishi.
Please do.
He writes, "This beautiful world designed by the Almighty is culturally evolved by innumerable generations of people in the course of millions of years. No one has the right to destroy it. Let us preserve it for our enjoyment and for future generations."
It is a poignant reminder of the stakes they were feeling in 2002. After laying out this highly technical, ruthlessly structured utopian plan, they strip it back to the most basic human imperative, survival. We inherited this world. We simply do not have the authority to break it.
And the document ends with a world peace prayer and a world blessing. The prayer asks for world leaders to open their hearts and unite to form that powerful world government. But the blessing is incredibly grounded. It says, "Rain may pour on all parts of the world timely and sufficiently. Food grains may grow abundantly to the satisfaction of all living beings."
It is a beautiful juxtaposition. You have high-level cosmic philosophy about magnetism and gravity, and you have a simple prayer for timely rain and enough grain to eat. It covers the entire spectrum of human existence, from the cosmos down to the soil.
It really does. And that brings us to the end of this immense journey today. We have traversed an unbelievable amount of conceptual ground. I mean, we started by stripping the United Nations of its veto power and dismantling national sovereignty as we know it, converting armies into infrastructure builders.
We examined a world that legislated theological tolerance, seized the excess wealth of religious institutions, outlawed commercial sports, and redefined money purely as a token of physical or mental labor.
We looked at a society that eliminated inherited wealth, solved unemployment by simply cutting everyone's work hours, mandated 6 exact months of biological maternity leave, and taught children to sublimate their anger through meditation. And finally, we explored a mandate to reinvent politicians as degree-holding figureheads and literally rewrite the fundamental laws of gravity to reflect a unified cosmos.
It is without a doubt a wildly utopian vision. But as we reflect on this document from Aliyar, it acts as a fascinating mirror for us today.
Yeah.
The value of a blueprint like this isn't necessarily in adopting it wholesale. It is in the uncomfortable questions it forces us to ask. It asks us to look at our current institutions, your job, your government, your scientific assumptions, and ask if they're actually serving the ultimate goal of a peaceful humanity, or if they are just perpetuating historical cycles of conflict.
It makes the invisible walls of our current global society visible precisely by suggesting we tear them down and build completely different ones. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with one final thing to mull over. One specific piece of this utopian puzzle to explore in your own mind. Imagine if tomorrow we applied just one of these rules. If every single politician on Earth suddenly woke up and had lost all executive power.
Just poof, gone.
Right. They lost the ability to make decisions based on gut instinct, corporate lobbying, or political survival, and were forced by law to strictly enact legislation based only on the consensus of academically vetted policy experts. Would the world dissolve into bureaucratic chaos, or would we finally see the dawn of the one humanity this Congress dreamed of?